There was a time when New York felt raw, real, and full of promise. The streets weren't polished, but they breathed life, from the rhythm of footsteps on cobblestones to the voices echoing through diners, stoops, and subways. In the 1960s, the city had a soul you could feel. Kids played on the sidewalks, artists took over lofts, and music spilled out of clubs that never closed. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Today, we're going back to that era. These are 19 places that captured the spirit of 1960s New York, the corners, the buildings, the parks, the landmarks, each one holding memories that still whisper if you know where to listen. Let's take a look. In Harlem, the Apollo wasn't just a music venue, it was a sacred battleground. Amateur night was legendary. A spotlight, a mic, and a crowd that didn't forgive mediocrity. If you were good, you left the stage floating. If you were bad, you didn't last 30 seconds. That pressure turned local kids into legends. In the 1960s, artists like James Brown and Aretha Franklin weren't just performing, they were igniting something deep. The Apollo gave a voice to soul, to funk, to black excellence. It was raw, loud, and unforgettable. If you made it here, you could make it anywhere. There was sand in your shoes, salt in the air, and a half-melted ice cream dripping down your fingers. Coney Island in the 60s still held its magic old-school rides, boardwalk barkers, and neon lights that flickered into the night. The cyclone roared, the Wonder Wheel spun slowly, and every child believed they were at the center of the universe. Even as some parts grew worn, nobody cared. Families still came by the thousands, chasing sea breezes and hot dogs from Nathan's. It wasn't glamorous, but it was alive. Coney Island was joy on a paper plate. Noisy, cheap, perfect joy. It wasn't a hotel. It was a living, breathing organism, loud, wild, and bursting with art. In the 60s, the Chelsea was home to rock stars, painters, poets, and nobodies who thought they might be somebody by morning. Janis Joplin, Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan all passed through these walls. There were no rules, no curfews, no silence. Just the clatter of typewriters, the echo of footsteps on creaky stairwells, and the occasional argument bleeding through the walls. Rent could be paid in paintings. Dreams could be shattered in a single night. But if you stayed at the Chelsea, you were part of something. To kids from the city, the Bronx Zoo was the closest thing to a safari. You didn't need a plane ticket, just a packed lunch and enough energy to explore every corner. Giraffes towered over wide-eyed children. Sea lions splashed in their pools, and the monorail felt like a ride into another world. It was one of those places where time moved differently. Parents let go of their kids' hands a little. Everything felt big, mysterious, and real. In the 60s, it was more than a zoo. It was a doorway to a bigger world. It shimmered with style and history. Fifth Avenue in the 60s wasn't just a street, it was a stage. Saks, Tiffany's, and Bergdorf Goodman dressed the windows like theaters, and the sidewalks felt like runways. Women wore gloves and pearls, men wore hats. Even a stroll here felt like something cinematic. But it wasn't all luxury. This avenue also saw protests, parades, and the beginning of big cultural shifts. Old money met new rebellion in silent glances. And when the Christmas lights went up, the whole street glowed like a dream. The old Yankee Stadium in the 1960s was more than just a ballpark. It was a temple. The cheers were louder, the hot dogs tasted better, and every game felt like it could end in a miracle. You didn't just go to see baseball. You went to feel part of a story bigger than yourself. Kids carried gloves, hoping to catch a foul ball. Fathers pointed to the field, retelling DiMaggio's plays or Mantle's home runs as if they just happened. The stadium smelled of popcorn, cigars, and summer dreams. It was gritty, honest, and magical, a piece of real New York. In the 1960s, Times Square was a sensory overload. Loud, chaotic, full of flashing neon and life at full volume. You could buy a hot dog from a street cart, watch a hustler pull a card trick, and hear a preacher shouting about salvation all within 20 steps. It wasn't polished, but it pulsed with real energy. Movie marquees lit up the nights, and the smell of pretzels and city steam was part of the air. This wasn't the corporate billboard jungle we know today. It was gritty, unpredictable, sometimes dangerous, but it was never boring. People came here to disappear, or to be seen. Often, both at once. Greenwich Village in the 60s was freedom in bricks and cobblestone. Bohemians, poets, radicals, and musicians, all packed into smoky cafes and small apartments, turning life into art. It was the beating heart of counterculture, raw, defiant, and full of soul. Dylan strummed in a corner bar. Activists plotted change over coffee. Students talked politics with strangers, and nothing felt off limits. The Village wasn't just a place you visited, it was a place that changed you. Ideas, music, and revolution lived side by side, and everyone walked a little faster, thinking a little deeper. It was the city's big green breath, a place where the chaos quieted, even just for an hour. Families picnicked on worn blankets, teens played frisbee near the sheep meadow, and jazz drifted from distant saxophones near Bethesda Terrace. Central Park was a soft space in a hard city. Horse-drawn carriages clopped by, lovers carved initials into tree trunks, and kids fed ducks with stale bread. In the 60s, it wasn't about curated events or clean lines. It was wild, real, and beautifully imperfect. A playground, a protest ground, a place to fall in love or find yourself. Crossing the Brooklyn Bridge in the 60s felt like entering a movie scene. The walk was windy, long, and unforgettable. Cabs honked below, and the skyline slowly unfolded in front of you like a promise. Tourists loved it, but to locals, it was a daily ritual of beauty and grit. Artists, students, and dreamers lingered on its walkway, taking in views and sketching notebooks full of hopes. The bridge itself was a symbol, a reminder that New York wasn't just tall, it was connected, human, alive. It was a small, dimly lit bar in Greenwich Village. Nothing fancy, nothing glamorous. But for many in the LGBTQ+ community, the Stonewall Inn was a rare, safe space in a city full of closed doors. It was where you could dance without looking over your shoulder. In June of 1969, it became something else entirely, the birthplace of a movement. The riots that began there weren't planned. They were the result of years of silence breaking. Stonewall didn't just make history, it shouted it out loud. The suits, the briefcases, the rush of footsteps. Wall Street in the 60s moved fast, like a living machine. It was a world of ticker tape and rotary phones, long before computers and flashing screens. Back then, the power was in the phone calls, the handshakes, the instinct. From the outside, it looked like order. Inside, it was chaos, but the kind that made fortunes. Young men in pressed shirts ran errands for stockbrokers, dreaming of making it big. This wasn't Silicon Valley. This was old-school ambition, sharpened in concrete and steel. In the 1960s, Grand Central was more than just a transit hub. It was a monument to movement. Marble floors echoed with the rhythm of heels and hurried footsteps, while the celestial ceiling watched generations come and go. Everyone passed through Grand Central, but no one passed through unchanged. You'd see businessmen rushing to make the train to Westchester, teenagers loitering beneath the clock, and lost tourists spinning in circles under the chandeliers. The Whispering Gallery worked its strange magic, and vendors sold coffee that tasted like city mornings. It was a place of motion, of reunions and goodbyes, and above all, of possibility. Standing tall above the city, the Empire State Building in the 60s was still the king of the skyline. No glass towers around it yet, just this one, bold and proud, cutting through the clouds. It was the city's crown, and tourists from every corner of the world lined up to catch a view from the top. From the observation deck, the city stretched out like a map of dreams. You could spot the Statue of Liberty, the bridges, even planes approaching Idlewild, and down below, life never stopped. It wasn't just a building, it was New York's exclamation mark. Walking into the Met back then felt like entering a timeless world. The noise of Fifth Avenue faded, and suddenly you were among pharaohs, knights, and Renaissance gods. It was majestic, overwhelming, and surprisingly accessible. School groups and solo wanderers shared the same silence before a painting. There was no social media, no hashtags, just the quiet awe of standing inches from history. Couples strolled arm in arm, parents whispered lessons to their kids, and artists sketched in corners. The museum wasn't just a destination, it was a sanctuary, a place to slow down, think bigger, and feel the weight of centuries around you. In the 1960s, Stepping into Radio City was like walking into a dream stitched in velvet and gold. The chandeliers, the sweeping staircases, the sense of occasion. It felt like every show mattered. The Rockettes were the queens of the stage, their legs moving in perfect unison, symbols of elegance and precision. Families came dressed in their best. Tourists waited in long lines, and the echo of applause lingered in the halls long after the curtain fell. There was a quiet pride in simply being there. It wasn't just entertainment, it was ritual. The city paused for a few hours to be dazzled. The Flatiron wasn't the tallest building, but it was one of the most unforgettable. That triangular wedge of stone and steel stood like a slice of history frozen in place. In the 60s, it was both a landmark and a quiet mystery. People walked by it daily, but always with a second glance. Photographers loved it, artists sketched it, and locals used it as a compass. The winds at the corner of 23rd and 5th were legendary, whipping skirts and scattering papers. It wasn't flashy, it was poetic, just standing there, timeless and a little strange, like a sculpture the city forgot to move. With its marble lions standing guard, the library was more than a place for books, it was a cathedral of ideas. The echo of shoes in the vast halls, the rustle of pages under green reading lamps, the stillness that wrapped the Rose Main reading room like a blanket. It was sacred. Writers, students, the curious and the lonely all found quiet refuge here. No phones, no noise, just ink, paper, and thought. In a fast city, the library gave you permission to slow down, to listen, to learn, or simply to be. In the 60s, Washington Square Park was rebellion with a fountain. Musicians strummed protest songs, poets read aloud to strangers, and chess games unfolded with fierce silence near the benches. It was more than a park, it was a stage. NYU students, Greenwich bohemians, beatniks and tourists all crisscrossed paths. The arch loomed overhead like an open door to another version of New York, one built on voices, causes, and art. The conversations you had here could change your mind, or your life. New York in the 1960s wasn't cleaner, or quieter, or richer, but it was more alive. The city breathed with possibility, with music on the sidewalks and stories behind every door. These places weren't just locations, they were characters in people's lives. Some of them are still here, others vanished or became something else entirely. But if you were there or know someone who was, you know what they meant. They weren't just buildings. They were where memories happened, where first kisses took place, where revolutions were whispered, where people felt seen. And now it's your turn. Did you visit any of these places or hear stories about them from someone who did? We'd love to read your memories in the comments. Because cities change, but memories, those stay.